Welcome to tonight's event. My name is Renee Grassi, Dakota County Library Youth Services Manager. And tonight's program, our virtual author talk with author Anna. We would like to begin with reading Dakota County Library's land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that Dakota County Library and its 9 locations are located on the traditional and ancestral lands that have been inhabited by the Wapakouta and Midwakatoan Dakota people and other Native nations from time immemorial. Seated in a land treaty signed in 1851, this land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards, the Native nations and peoples of this region. We also want to respectfully acknowledge that Dakota County Library is the namesake of the Dakota people. By offering this acknowledgement, we work towards our value of acting inclusively and our mission of learning, and recognize our collective responsibility to engage our community in the history of the lands of Indigenous people. Thank you. This program is made possible with funds from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, which was approved by Minnesota voters in 2008. Tonight's event is part of a series of dedicated programs that uplift diverse Asian American and Pacific Islander experiences and voices. We're so glad to have you here tonight as we learn about historical and contemporary personal experiences of being Asian American and Pacific Islander in America, and gain an understanding of the ongoing movement for Asian American civil rights and the fight for acceptance and belonging in this country. It is a delight and an honor to welcome and introduce our featured guest tonight, Anna. Anna was born in South Korea and grew up in San Diego, California. As a young person, she never imagined that she would grow up to be a writer. First, she thought she was supposed to be a doctor, but then after realizing how many years of schooling it would take, she moved her sights to being a pharmacist. In college, after taking political science and chemistry, being a lawyer started looking really good. It was only during her senior year in college, when she took a children's literature class, did she discover her true love of writing. National Book Award finalist and winner of the American Library Association's Michael L. Prince Award, Dakota County Library is honored to welcome our featured guest tonight. So without further ado, Anna.
Thank you so much, Renee. It is really, really lovely to be with you again. I love this program, and you have been such a light, a beacon during this really difficult time. So I'm so excited to be back with your wonderful readers, your audience, your with the library, right? I love the library. I'm going to start with this just a short reading. It's called, from my novel, A Step from Heaven, Only God Can. Pray, Harmony says. Pray to God and everything will be better. Put your hands together tight like a closed book. Good. Then say what I taught you, young Jew. Remember? Dear Father who art in heaven. Harmony, where is heaven? Heaven is where your Harabaji is. He is with God in a place where there's only goodness and love. Can I go there? Someday, if you pray and love God. Do you love God? Yes, I say, even though at church, the picture of his face with the dark round money eyes makes me hide behind the bench. But I see heaven and Harabaji, so I try to love him. Is heaven around here? Can we go there tomorrow? I ask. No, heaven is in the sky and far away. Now pray while I read the good book. I close my eyes and put my hands together tight. I move my lips the way I see Harmony do, but without the sounds. God must have very strong ears to hear the words. Dear Father in heaven. That is all I remember, so I open my eyes. Harmony is rocking and reading her good book with all the stories about how God came down to be with us. Only when he got here, he said his name was Jesus. I wonder, why did he make up a new name? I wish I could make up a new name, but Harmony says, do not be foolish. I look at Harabuji's picture on the table with the candles all around. He has sleepy eyes, like cats in the sun. They are nice eyes. My Harabuji. Appa has the same eyes, also the same black hair sticking up straight in the front and flat in the back. I close my eyes, put my hands together tight. Harabuchi, I say with my lips moving but without the sound. If you are in heaven and God is with you, then maybe you can hear me too. Harmony says Appa needs a good spanking and there is nobody here to give him one. Could you send God down so he can be Jesus again and give Appa his spanking? Then Appa will be nice all the time, like when he brought home Mishi and Amma said, "We cannot keep that dog." And Appa said, "But she's only a baby doggy." And then he made the baby doggy face. And Oma laughed and pushed Appa on the shoulder. She said, "That dog looks just like you. No wonder it followed you home." Then Mishi got to stay and be my friend. I like it when Appa is nice and Oma makes her squeaky shoes laugh. Amen. When I open my eyes, Harmony is looking at me, sneaky peek. That was a long prayer, she says, and turns a page. What did you pray about? That God would come down and give Appa a spanking, I tell her. Harmony holds her good book tight with both hands. She whispers, "He's the only one who can." So this was from my first novel, A Step from Heaven. I'm going to share a little bit of how I became a writer. I have a little PowerPoint. I'm going to take off my video because I think it might be more helpful. So this is me. I was born in a small town called Jumunjin in South Korea. I grew up near the ocean. I have a lot of memories of Korea, but they're not super crystal clear. One of the memories that I have is, my parents told me this, but I also knew this. I love snow. I remember trying to eat it all the time. It was one of the things that made me really happy. I also really vividly remember my dog Mishi. I remember my parents asking me to go into her doghouse because I was the smallest and I could go in there, and she would steal all our shoes and I would have to go in there to grab all her shoes out of her doghouse. The other thing that I remember was when we left Korea, she was the one like heartbreak of my little years. I remember she had to go to a farm, and my father was trying to convince me at the time when we were leaving that she would be really happy because she would get to run around and she would have all this space. But the real heartbreak was that I had to leave my dog behind when we immigrated from Korea to the United States. So in 1976, we immigrated from Korea to San Diego. My parents, my father, that's so in the middle right here is my aunt. She married my Uncle Gus, who is an American GI, and she was the one who came to the United States. And soon after, she was able to apply for a visa to bring my family over. And so this is me and my aunt and my uncle and my mom. This was my first American Christmas. When we immigrated, one of the things that my mom told me was that all Americans have curly hair. And she took me to a beauty salon to get my hair permed. And it was one of my first vivid memories as a child, was going from very straight hair, which is my sister, we all had straight hair, to having curly hair. And I thought, how amazing and wonderful and scary and strange that now I'm an American because I have curly hair. We grew up in the foothills of San Diego, as far away from the ocean in a coastal town as we could be. We were actually in the foothills of a desert because San Diego is a desert. We grew up wanting to see snow. And so my parents would sometimes drive up into the mountains. And I remember how much we loved playing in the snow. It was magical. And my parents, because they grew up in Korea, they also missed the snow so much. I think because we talked about it so much that oh, this is me and my sister, my brother, that I love cold, and I learned to be a figure skater in San Diego, of all places. It was a magical time, and at the same time really hard, because my parents were working so many different jobs. We were immigrants. I was trying to find my place in the world. But my sister and I, we were teenagers. We rocked Ray-Bans. We went to a Korean church. It was difficult, and at the same time also really amazing. I was the first person in my family to go on to college. And then my sister went to college and my brother went to college. So our immigrant story was really one of dreams and hopes, and dreams come true. I remember really young that I had no idea about what American life was. And so I would read books. And I remember reading books about Laura Ingalls Wilder, and loving the books that she wrote, and trying to imagine what American food tasted like. And so I would ask my mom to buy us TV dinners, because that was the only way that we could actually taste American food. It was the only way actually to get me to do laundry and dishes. And if my parents bought me a TV dinner, it was like super special. The thing that I coveted the most was the cherry cobbler, because I love dessert. And I learned down the line to become a pastry chef because of dessert so much. This was one of the images from Farmer Boy from Little loving to, because it was the way that I imagined all Americans were eating. This is me in college. Do you remember the MacBook? It was a huge computer, but it was so revolutionary. Remember typing, being on my MacBook, trying to figure out how to actually email. This was the first time people started emailing. So that was my dorm room. That's me studying and feeling like I was finally fitting in. It was the first time that I ever really felt like I fit in, because I had other geeky people with me in college, because I was super geeky. So the thing that you can't see, and the pictures that I don't have for you, are all the pictures of me feeling ashamed, feeling scared, feeling not truly who I am, because I didn't want to be Asian. You don't see the pictures of me being so shy that I never spoke in class, because I didn't want anybody to notice me, because if they noticed me, they would taunt me. They would speak gibberish like, no, ching chong chong chong. They would say Chinese, Japanese, look at these dirty knees. They would race after me, and I would run home from school because I didn't want to be teased. I didn't speak through elementary school. I didn't speak through middle school. The only time I really spoke was with my family and with my Korean friends at church. I grew up really bifurcated. I grew up in a very all-white, homogenous neighborhood. And I also grew up on the weekends with my Korean family and my Korean church. And so there were moments when I was completely myself, and then lots and lots of moments where I felt really deeply ashamed of who I was and the way that I looked. It wasn't until college that I finally found books that really reflected who I was. I remember finding Sandra Cisneros' The House on Mango Street, and she talked about feeling so deeply ashamed of where she grew up, so deeply ashamed of being brown, Latina, in a neighborhood that she didn't want to be a part of, but at the same time loving her neighborhood and seeing the amazing people that she was brought up with. And I remember this book and how much it spoke to who I was. It was the first time that I saw my experience mirrored in a story that, you know, all my life I was looking for this book, but I never got it. When I was growing up, I read books that were about survival. I read Hatchet. I read, you know, Island on the Blue Dolphins. I read Little House on the Prairie because that was also about survival. And so the first time that I read a story that was about an immigrant, a person of color, it just resonated with me and it made me feel seen. And then I read A Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston, and it blew my mind. I was like, that's me. She wrote about being the silent girl, and I was like, that's me. It was so life transforming. When you see yourself in stories, it makes you realize that you are not alone. And so when I found those two books, it changed my life because I finally felt validated in what I felt, in who I was. I recognized that shame was normal. We all feel shame, but for me, like, I felt so incredibly bad that I was not proud of my parents for not speaking English. I felt so incredibly bad that I didn't look like everybody else in the school that I was brought up in. I felt so incredibly bad that I was ashamed of myself. And when I saw those stories and saying, you're not alone, it was so powerful to not be the only one feeling those things. There's an amazing educator named Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. She talks about windows and mirrors. And one of the most important things as a young reader is you want to see a mirror of yourself. I never got that mirror. I had windows into lots of other people's experiences, but I did not have that mirror. So when I read House on Mango Street, when I read Woman Warrior, that was a mirror to my experience that helped me feel I was not alone. I had so many windows, all those other amazing books that were windows into other lives. So when I became a writer, one of the first things that I recognized that I had to do was write to the child that I, in me needed to see. I had to write to that child who needed a book that said, you're not alone. So in homage to The House on Mango Street, which was such a powerful, important book for me, I started to write vignettes about memories that I had, my curly hair, feeling alone, running away from the bullies. So I started to write all those stories that were so important. And that became my first novel. A Step from Heaven came from being at a wonderful MFA program. And I didn't know that I was going to become a writer. I was always told, as Renee said, I was going to become a doctor because, hello, immigrants. Everybody wants a doctor in the family. So I was supposed to be the doctor. And then I didn't want to become the doctor. So I lied and told my parents I was going to become a lawyer while I was in college. But I really did not want to be a lawyer. The whole time I was in college, I was in literature classes, I was reading. And then finally, I admitted that I wanted to become a writer after I got into the MFA program at Vermont College. And so it took a long time, but it was the one thing that was like consistently true in my life, which was I love stories. I loved reading stories. And when I discovered writing, I realized that I loved to write stories. But it took a long time for me to admit it to myself, because I had been brought up for so long trying to realize the dreams of my parents. And then once I could actually tell them the truth, I had to make sure they were okay. You know, when we love our parents, we want to not disappoint them, right? So finally, I was able to write the stories that I wanted to write. And one of the first stories that I wanted to write was the story of me becoming myself, which is basically telling an immigrant story, but it also like took off and it became something else. But it there's so many, like we can go through the book A Step from Heaven and I can tell you all the things that are true and all the things that, you know, I fictionalize, because that's what we do as writers. And the next book that I wrote was called The Fold, because, oh, I'm sorry, wait for me, because I wanted to write a story about my sister, myself, and the things that we would do. We were always partners in crimes. The third book is about plastic surgery. The fourth book deals with mental illness, which is the hard part, because I grew up not ever really talking about mental illness. It was around me. My grandmother suffered from depression, but we were never able to really name it, because in Korean culture, there is no name for mental illness. She was sick and they would take her to the doctor and they said she has headaches, you know, put her on some vitamins, things like that. But I don't think they quite knew what to say because she didn't speak English and she couldn't really say what was hurting her. But I remember that she really did not, she wasn't able to really vocalize what the pain and where it came from. And the reality was that she suffered from depression, but my parents didn't know how to talk about it. My grandmother didn't know how to talk about it. It wasn't something that was part of our culture. She ended up dying by suicide. And I remember that nobody could talk about it. Our community, our church, our family, her friends, nobody could talk about it because it was so shameful. And so that was the first time that I started to recognize that there was something wrong. So I did a deep dive into research and trying to understand what had happened, because my grandmother raised us and she was such a loving part of our lives. And so that was the first time that I started to understand what had happened to her. Up until that point, I always thought she had headaches. I always thought the reason why she couldn't get up in the morning was because she was sick, you know, physically, that maybe something was wrong with her. But when she passed away, I started to read and try to understand what had happened. And that's when I discovered she probably had depression. She had been suffering from it for a really long time, but there was no way to help her because my parents didn't know how to talk about it with her. It was just something that we had lived with and we just didn't understand. So from there, I started to do a lot of research for my fourth book, which is called A Place Between Breaths. I think the taboo around mental illness is really, really traumatizing, especially during these times. We have all been going through such rough times. If the pandemic has taught us nothing else besides wear your mask, it has taught us our mental health is really fragile. It's been so difficult in so many different ways. I am so grateful, knock on wood, that I've had a good support team. But that is not the case for everybody. And I've had to recognize that as much as, as a writer, I like being alone, but it is really hard. A lot of us need our support systems, our friends, our routines, and it has all gotten disrupted. And so I have felt really dark many times. I have felt not myself. I think it's hard to talk about. And that's one of the things that I struggle with as much as a writer, trying to illuminate different aspects of the things that my family has gone through. My brother also died by suicide. He suffered from addiction. In the last part of his life, we believe he suffered from schizophrenia, which is where my fourth book comes from. But during this time, I've also realized mental health is fragile. It is difficult. There are moments in time where I think everybody suffers. Nobody is okay all the time. That's a fucking illusion. Sorry for the recording, kids. I'm sorry. It is crap. It is crap. It's an illusion. We all suffer. It is really difficult. But the thing that has brought me through in many, many ways, the friends that you have, family, your librarians, whoever can be a lifeline, it is so vital. It is so important to reach out because you are not alone. Whether it's finding your story in a book, whether it is reaching out to someone like your librarian, Renee, who is incredible, like me. You can find me on my website, Anna at onwriting.com. There are so many people who want to talk to you, who want to help you. And that is the thing that's so vital and important for you to realize, young people. I'm speaking to you, young people. You are not alone. I thought I was alone for many, many years. I'm afraid as an Asian American. I haven't been this afraid since I was really young. I'm afraid because there's been so much hate and violence against Asian Americans because there has been propaganda, but somehow we are the virus. I also know that there are a lot of people in pain trying to find an scapegoat, and we're easy targets. We look different. But I also recognize that there is a lot of pain, and that's why this has been happening. And at the same time, every time there's been violence, I have found my allies reaching out to me saying, you're not alone. And I want to try and balance how many people have reached out to me saying, I'm not alone, with the amount of violence that I see for my community, which has been heartbreaking. It has been so hard seeing how many old people, young people, women have been targeted, young boys targeted. It breaks my heart And I know that you all have been pained by the police brutality against our Black community members. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on, and it sucks. It really does. And then I think about our allies, I think about our community, and we have to balance it. And I'm a young adult writer, so this is how I balance. We are the change, right? We've been told this so many times. We are the change that we want to be. So every day, and I tell this to my girls, what do you want? What do you want to fail at? What do you want to do better? And you should fail because that's what we're going to do. But we need to do better. We need to fail at doing better, because eventually we're not going to fail anymore. Because if we keep doing better, that means that we're doing something different. Every day you wake up and we're going to try and do something better today. Sometimes I get mad at my kids for not like putting away their clothes. And I'm like, today I am going to be kind when I say put your clothes away. It's little things and it's big things. It's standing up for the people that you believe in. It's maybe learning how to be a better ally. I learned that sometimes when you see people being violent, you try to distract. You try to talk about the weather with them. Or maybe it's to call the police, or maybe it's to scream and yell. I remember seeing a woman running down the street, screaming at a man to leave her alone. I was holding Tupperware, walking out of my friend's house, and I remember seeing her screaming and running down the street, and I literally stopped between her and the man with my Tupperware. And she was crying, and I told the man, get away from her. She told you to leave. And he started to get in my face and threaten me. And I was still holding my Tupperware. And then my friends came out of the house because they heard me yelling. And I remember they all surrounded me, but I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was that I heard a woman screaming, and I knew that I needed to protect her. Sometimes, and then my friends told me, like, what are you doing? You just got in front of that guy and this woman, like, that was not safe. And I was like, I know. But it was what I felt like I had to do in the moment. And so sometimes we are not safe. Sometimes it takes bravery to step up and to say, don't do that. Sometimes it takes smarts to say, hey, how can I distract you so you're not bothering that person in front of you? Learn about allyship, learn about how to distract, how to help. I think that's so powerful. And I am so incredibly grateful for all the people who reached out to me when they have been touched by the fact that violence is not allowed, violence is not accepted, violence is not who we are as a community, as a nation. This is not what we should be showing to our children, to the world. If there's anything that I remember about being brought here to the United States, is that this country was supposed to be something different. It started from a foundation of being different and equal, with values and morals and a dream to be a place of refuge. And I think that is the one thing that I hold on to about our country. It began with this root of being different. And I still hold on to that dream. I think this is an incredibly powerful place. I believe that it can be still the incredibly powerful place of change and difference, which is why, from a little girl that would never say the Pledge of Allegiance because I was never American enough, to a place where I say now, this is my country and I want to fight for change, that this is now my homeland. And this is where I'm bringing up my kids, and they are American, just like I am today. I am really grateful to be here with you, Renee.